Someone's mistake can shed light on many things that you didn't even know about before. My wife cheated on me with her boss, but I found out about it in an extremely unusual way, namely, when I was taken to the police station and suspected of a serious crime. It was an extremely difficult but very instructive period in my life. Tony Catalano may not have been the brightest individual, but his loyalty and dedication were unquestionable. Over the years, Mr. B had recognized his commitment by assigning him increasingly important tasks. Now faced with his most significant assignment yet, Big Tony was determined to validate Mr. B's trust in him. Studying the photograph of his target once more, he took note of the black Cadillac Escalade nestled in the poorly lit parking garage. Tony was aware that Arthur Clark owed the boss a substantial sum for assistance rendered in a business transaction. His mission was to remind Clark, the CEO of a prominent insurance company, of the repercussions of his late payment. Give him the Big Tony growl and, if necessary, imply physical harm but refrain from any violent actions. These corporate types are typically weak-kneed, and he'll likely resort to pleading once confronted. Ensure he contacts me first thing tomorrow to address his delayed payment, Mr. B had instructed Tony. Big Tony had conducted some research on Arthur Clark. He was aware that Clark was a well-presented, attractive man who took care of himself, sporting wavy brown hair and deep brown eyes. Clark drove a 2022 Escalade and typically lingered as the last executive in the building, implying that they would be alone in the parking garage. The second-to-last executive had departed just 10 minutes earlier. Tony observed attentively from behind a column support as the garage door opened. He couldn't help but be impressed by Clark. The man appeared approximately a decade younger than his photograph as he made his way to his car. Tony, standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing 255 pounds, approached the other man, closing in as he reached his vehicle. Mr. B is displeased. You're overdue on your payment, Tony snarled at the man, who stared back at him with a puzzled expression. Who? I don't know anyone named Mr. B, the man stammered, his eyes widening. Tony growled once more, withdrawing a pistol from his waistband. Nice attempt, but if you don't want to spend the rest of your life limping. On a balmy day, Tony perspired profusely, his grip on the gun slipping due to sweat. In a panic moment, he accidentally discharged the weapon while readjusting his hold. The resulting gunshot reverberated loudly within the confines of the garage. Horror gripped Tony when he saw the red liquid gushing out of the man amid the screams, causing him to faint. Although Tony was still alive, he doubted the man's chances of survival as the blood continued to flow. This unforeseen event was not part of Tony's plans, and quick thinking was not his strong suit. With no apparent escape route, Tony, under immense pressure, recalled a line from a pirate movie, "Dead men tell no tales." Given the circumstances, it seemed apparent. He fired another shot, ending Clark's life before departing. Tony anticipated Mr. B's displeasure at this mistake. Unaware of car models, he failed to notice the Escalade model year difference as he left the garage. Meanwhile, Gary Finchel lay dying, his phone ringing repeatedly before eventually diverting to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. On a bustling Friday at the dental practice of Dr. Alan Siegel and Dr. Victor Washington, two individuals who quickly identified themselves as police officers approached the receptionist and inquired about Dr. Washington. 10 minutes later, a bewildered and flushed Dr. Washington found himself being escorted out in handcuffs. Victor Washington waited until his attorney arrived at the police station before consenting to an interview. As I mentioned to you earlier, I had minimal acquaintance with Gary Finchel. He was employed at the same company as my wife. I encountered him occasionally at her workplace gatherings, such as Christmas parties and 4th of July barbecues. I doubt I exchanged more than 100 words with the man since Tracy started working there 4 years ago, Victor stated sharply. What the hell is happening? He added. You're aware that Mr. Finchel was murdered the other night, correct? Queried the male officer. Yes. Tracy seemed quite distressed when she learned about it yesterday. I believe she left work early. She might be at home again today, Victor replied. The two officers exchanged glances, sharing a smile. Victor and his attorney noted the exchange. "Where is this leading?" inquired Victor's attorney. "A man loses his life, and you don't expect us to overlook his lover's cuckold, do you?" remarked the female officer. Victor Washington was on the verge of falling out of his chair. "What? What?" he exclaimed. "Betrayal? My wife, another man? You're saying you had no idea your wife was cheating with Gary Finchel and you didn't take revenge?" "And I'm the Easter Bunny, and she's the Tooth Fairy," remarked the male officer. "You've already confessed you lack an alibi for the time of the murder, and you clearly had a motive." Victor slouched in his seat, his lawyer murmuring in his ear. "No, honestly, I had no clue," Victor stated quietly. He gazed vacantly at the two officers. "I didn't know," he directed at them. "How did you guys find out?" The officers exchanged glances but remained silent. "You shot him, Dr. Washington." "We understand," the male officer said. "How did you discover my wife's affair with Finchel?" the dentist asked once more. "Your wife left 2 messages on his cell phone about meeting him around the time of the crime. She confessed when we pressed her," the officer explained. As Victor lay on his jail cot that night, he had ample time to contemplate his predicament. The police hadn't charged him yet, but they had 48 hours before they were obliged to release him. Despite being a clever man, Victor found himself more preoccupied with the news of his wife's infidelity than with the looming possibility of being charged with murder. He and Tracy had shared a 26-year-long marriage and raised 2 adult children together. Up until just a few hours ago, Victor had believed their bond was unbreakable. Now he was consumed by questions. How long had the affair been going on? What prompted it? How could he have missed the signs? On Sunday evening, Victor found himself formally accused of murder and was deemed a flight risk, resulting in the denial of bail. He couldn't help but notice that his wife hadn't attempted to contact him since his arrest. Did she too suspect him of killing her lover? Victor reminisced about Wednesday evening. For nearly a year now, it had become routine for Tracy to go out for dinner and chat with her close friend Laura. Victor had never questioned it much before. He trusted his wife. When she returned home around 8 o'clock, however, she seemed unusually tense and didn't hesitate to express it. "I didn't see any dishes in the sink. Please tell me you didn't just have Pop-Tarts for dinner again. Honestly, Vic, you're perfectly capable of cooking." "I know you can," she complained. "Maybe I just don't feel like cooking when I'm alone. I miss you, darling. I'm not a fan of these girls' night-out outings." "Oh, come on," she retorted before storming off to the shower. Tracy's frustration with her husband grew as her relationship with Gary Finchel continued, though Victor only recently became aware of the issue in their marriage. Tracy, deeply devoted to her husband, hadn't sought an affair. When her friendship with her boss Finchel began to deepen over the years of working closely together, Finchel began to see potential for more. As Tracy confided in him about her personal life, Tracy, standing at 5 feet 5 inches and weighing 120 pounds with a curvy figure and shoulder-length straight black hair, appeared much younger than her 48 years. But she became increasingly anxious about approaching her 50th birthday. Gary gradually boosted her confidence with compliments, despite her husband also praising her. Yet Tracy seemed particularly gratified by the attention from another man. Finchel, who was married and had 2 children of his own, courted Tracy's affection with careful patience, and it took him almost a year before putting another man's woman to bed. Despite her smaller stature compared to her husband, Tracy found Finchel a more skilled lover, ignoring the novelty factor that added to her pleasure. The illicit nature of the affair strengthened their bond. Tracy and her lover usually met for bed meetings once or twice a week. They also often met for lunch and spent a lot of time together in the office. Their affair was a top secret, and even Arthur C. Clarke knew about it. Victor had his lawyer handle the financial investigation on Monday morning due to his dwindling trust in his wife. That same morning, his children visited him while he was in custody and informed him about the sensationalized coverage in the tabloids regarding his predicament. One of the headlines, posted by his son Jared, crudely referred to the deceased's shot masculinity. Well, I have to give credit to the headline writer for being cunning, at least, Victor remarked quietly. That's not funny, Dad. You're in serious trouble here, and you're making jokes, complained his daughter Dee. I'm sure everything will resolve itself, sweetheart. I didn't commit the crime, I swear, Victor assured his children. Mom certainly seems convinced otherwise. We stayed at the house last night, and she spent most of the time with us calling you a murderer. She claimed you couldn't handle her new man being a superior person, a better lover, Jared recounted. I eventually told her to stop talking nonsense. Jared flashed a sheepish grin at his father. In typical situations, he understood that Victor wouldn't condone his son using harsh language towards his wife, but this was far from typical. Victor returned the grin, prompting Jared to breathe a sigh of relief. I'm grateful for your support, Victor acknowledged. When did you learn about Mom? His daughter inquired. Not until they arrested me. I keep telling the cops that I had no idea, Victor replied. I cared about your mother, but I won't end up in jail just because she's turned promiscuous. I'd like to know who eliminated that jerk, though. I'd happily shake their hand. The children exchanged looks of utter surprise. They had always known their father to be nothing but truthful with them. Similarly, they had never known their mother to be deceitful with them either. But it was undeniable now that she had been dishonest with both their father and them. She attempted to justify her infidelity by consistently blaming their father for Finchell's murder. She repeatedly insisted to anyone who would listen that the media was unfairly targeting her for a minor indiscretion while giving her husband a pass for the murder. Yes, I had an affair, but your father took a man's life. The damn press only cares about the sexual aspect, she lamented to her children. Well, if Dad committed murder, it's only because you had a sexual relationship with this man. It's all about intimacy, Jared retorted. The state authorities became immediately suspicious upon discovering a 9mm pistol alongside the decomposed remains of a large man in a rural area several months later. 2 days later, ballistics analysis on the firearm revealed a connection to a high-profile case from the previous spring, famously known as the jilted husband case. Such incidents, where a betrayed husband resorts to violence against his wife's lover, were uncommon. The deceased was identified as Tony Big Tony Catalano, a minor member of the mafia associated with George B.'s organization. Despite thorough investigation by both state and local law enforcement, no apparent link between Catalano and the individual imprisoned for the murder of Gary Finchell, Dr. Victor Washington, could be established. The resurgence of interest in the jilted husband case reignited media attention, prompting collaboration between journalists and law enforcement to uncover any connection between the mafia and the insurance company. Eventually, the police succeeded in identifying Arthur Clark as the missing link, though it took a vigilant video technician at a local news station to piece together the entire puzzle. Rob Compto from KRNT News was examining photos of the key figures in both cases when he noticed the striking physical resemblance between Gary Finchell and his boss, Clark. It occurred to him that both men drove black Escalades, although Finchell was 2 years older. What if Big Tony mistakenly shot Finchell, thinking he was targeting Clark? Compto proposed during an unofficial meeting with the two investigating officers. Could it be that Finchell losing his, manhood was just an odd coincidence? Further inquiry prompted the police to consider the video technician's hypothesis. Several employees from the insurance company pointed out that Finchell's meticulous grooming and car preference seemed like obvious attempts to curry favor with his boss. George Burrell wasn't pleased with Big Tony when he reported that his assignment had gone wrong, resulting in Clark's death that night. The mafia boss always struggled to control his notorious bad temper, but in his line of work, it wasn't always feasible. I explicitly told you not to shoot, you bloody idiot. What part of no shooting didn't you understand? Burrell roared at the trembling man. You shot him twice and killed him. I messed up big time, Mr. B. I'm really sorry, Tony said apologetically. The gun started slipping out of my hand. I tried to readjust my grip, and it went off. He was bleeding heavily, and I knew he wouldn't make it. I thought he might spill if I just left him there, so I put him out. Buell pondered for a moment before responding. Have Andrew take you to our place on East 9th and watch over you for a few days until we can arrange for you to leave town for a while. He'll keep you hidden and well-fed. Thank you, Mr. B. I really appreciate this. I'm truly sorry about what happened. All right, get going, Tony, Buell said as he patted the large man on the shoulder and guided him toward the door. Tony's destiny was decided when it was discovered that the person who died was not Arthur Clark, but one of his staff members. Clark had left the office earlier that day for a medical appointment. This might not be the most undesirable outcome, Buell remarked to his chief aide, Frankie Donatel. It will certainly demonstrate to Mr. Clark that we are not to be underestimated. But damn, I always had a soft spot for Tony, that lovable naive guy. Understand what needs to be taken care of, Donatel acknowledged with a nod and exited the room. Tracy's life took a nosedive following Finchell's death. Unaware that her husband had any knowledge of her affair, she was utterly shocked by his violent act against another man. Suddenly gripped by genuine fear, she found solace in the fact that the police had apprehended him and he was being detained without bail. Despite her children's dismay over her affair, Tracy attempted to divert attention from her infidelity by emphasizing the sensational aspect of her lover's murder by her husband. However, this tactic was undermined by the media, who sensationalized the story of a betrayed husband taking lethal action. I swear, you'd think I'm the first woman in the city to ever stray from her marriage, Tracy complained to her colleague Liz during a lunch break about 2 weeks after the incident. According to the damn press, I'm practically synonymous with infidelity. Well, it's not every day your jealous husband shoots your lover and kills him, Liz remarked with a nervous laugh. Noticing Tracy's expression, she quickly murmured, Sorry, Tracy. Pretty much everyone here knew you and Gary were involved romantically, but how deep were your feelings for each other? Tracy, were you two in love? I did care for Vic, but Gary and I were developing something more serious. It's just a shame we'll never get to see where it could have led. I can't fathom Victor being capable of murder. It's true what they say, you never truly know someone, huh? Tracy remarked. I suppose not, Liz replied softly. Liz had been present with Tracy and a few other colleagues at Gary's funeral the week prior. She observed Gary's wife casting hostile looks towards Tracy multiple times. Tracy seemed to keep her gaze low, though tears were evident throughout the service. Liz sensed Tracy's apprehension about Gary's widow potentially causing a scene. Thankfully, nothing untoward occurred. Tracy made a point of staying in the background, avoiding any confrontation with the widow. Having never experienced incarceration before, Victor was overwhelmed by the sensation of freedom upon being released after over 4 months in jail. To him, it felt akin to experiencing the most intense pleasure of his life. Wow, Lance, the air feels so much fresher. I can't believe it, he exclaimed with joy as he exited the jail alongside his attorney. The city's district attorney dropped the charges against Victor when the police discovered that another man, Big Tony Catalano, was responsible for the murder of Gary Finchell, his wife's lover. Lance Weatherman drove Victor to the home he had shared with his wife Tracy for the past 15 years. Tracy was still at work, it being just past noon. Stepping into the house, Victor couldn't help but notice that everything looked exactly as he remembered it. As Lance observed, Victor slowly explored the entire house, running his hands over the walls, furniture, and knickknacks as if he were blind. I've missed this place so much, even with everything that's happened, Victor murmured. Victor approached his well-stocked liquor cabinet. Aware that Tracy abstained from hard alcohol, it likely remained untouched since his arrest. The cabinet boasted at least 25 bottles of various spirits. A moment for celebration demands a single malt, Victor declared, retrieving a partially filled bottle of Glenmorangie 12-year-old and pouring shots for himself and Lance. Thank you for your support, Lance, and for sticking by me during the toughest times, he expressed. I know this meant more than just a paycheck. They both sipped their shots quietly, Lance tapping his fingers on the manila folder resting on the table. Why do you think Tracy didn't divorce me while I was in jail? Victor inquired. Initially, perhaps due to the chaos surrounding the situation, especially with all the media frenzy. Later, she might have assumed you'd take care of it from prison, Lance speculated. The kids mentioned she was convinced I murdered her lover and harbored resentment, so it's surprising she hasn't initiated it yet, Victor mused. She'll be in for quite a shock when she returns. Maybe amidst all this, she's had a change of heart and wants to reconcile. Gary's gone, the kids are angry with her, she's practically become a real-life Cruella de Vil. What's the saying? Making the best out of a bad situation? Lance suggested. Upon arriving home, Tracy was taken aback by the unfamiliar car parked in her driveway. Initially mistaking it for another reporter seeking a quote, she soon realized that the occupant had already made their way into her home. Hastily dialing 911, she provided the dispatcher with all pertinent details. Within moments, 2 uniformed police officers entered the Washington residence, accompanied by Tracy. "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed upon seeing Victor. As the officers brandished their weapons, both Victor and Lance raised their hands in surrender. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I live here. I'm Vic Washington. I was just released from jail a few hours ago. Even got the DA to apologize to me," Victor explained. "True. I'm his attorney." "They dropped all charges," added Lance. One of the police officers phoned in to confirm the statement, leaving Tracy stunned. "He was just another pawn in a pathetic tale of misfortune, Tracy," Victor remarked. "He happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Besides, why would I ever risk going to jail for someone like you? You overestimate yourself." Tracy's face flushed with embarrassment as she lowered her head. As the 2 officers prepared to depart, Lance requested their presence to witness something. Handing Tracy a manila envelope, he informed her that she had been served. "I'm not certain about wanting a divorce, Vic," Tracy murmured. "I truly believed you were responsible for Gary's death, but since you weren't, perhaps there's still a chance for us." "Are you completely delusional, woman? You betrayed me. Forget everything else. Forget that your infidelity landed me in jail for over 4 months," Victor yelled. "You praised him to the kids, claimed he was a better man, a better lover. Well, I refuse to settle for Gary Finchell's leftovers." Vic found himself uncertain about how he could adequately express his gratitude to Alan Siegel, his business partner, and Alan's wife, Marilyn, for the unwavering support they extended to him throughout his wrongful imprisonment and divorce. The Siegels made regular visits to Victor in jail, ensuring he wasn't alone, and Alan went above and beyond, working 50 to 60-hour weeks to manage Victor's workload in his absence. After taking a week off to readjust to his life, Victor returned to work, astonished by the kindness and support he received from people around him. Many went out of their way to offer words of encouragement, and some even took the initiative to share their contact information with him on slips of paper. Despite feeling embarrassed, Victor accepted these gestures, not wanting to offend anyone. It dawned on him the profound impact of the press and social media, as his children, Alan and Marilyn, all highlighted how sympathetic portrayals in the media contrasted sharply with the negative light cast upon his ex-wife, Tracy, and her partner, Gary. In the upscale restaurant where they were seated, Marilyn Siegel reached out for Victor's hand, expressing her concern. "What's happening, Vic? It's been 2 years. Your mind seems focused, but your heart isn't in it," she said. Victor met Marilyn's gaze, recognizing her and Alan as his pillars of support in recent years, alongside his daughter, Dee. Marilyn especially had taken a personal interest in Victor's well-being, often watching over him like a mother hen. With unwavering patience, she awaited his response, prompting him to reconsider any flippant replies. "Things aren't the same anymore, Em. I can engage with women. I can even have physical relationships, but there's a void. There's no real connection. I understand that sex can exist without love, but that's not what I'm after," Vic admitted. "Vic, you're not going to find that connection on the first, second, or third date. Remember how you fell for Tracy? It took time. You got to know each other. Love didn't happen overnight. You're rushing it, expecting the one to miraculously appear. You go out a couple of times, then move on. It doesn't work like that, Marilyn reasoned. But I'm 52, not 22, March. I don't have the luxury of time. Time for love, Marilyn cut in. Come on, Vic, aging doesn't make time move faster, and if it's meant to be, that's fine. But you have to give it a chance first. Marilyn let out an annoyed sigh before casting a sidelong glance at her friend. Unbeknownst to her, she was perhaps the only person Victor would pay attention to. By chance, Marilyn and Alan began hosting intimate gatherings at their house every few months, always ensuring there were several single women present, including Victor. Victor wasn't oblivious to Marilyn's intentions, and he remarked to Alan about Marilyn's discerning taste in women. You better be on your best behavior, buddy, because if she ever dumps you, she's got a whole lineup of beautiful women to choose from, Victor warned. I've noticed that, Alan replied as he reached up to ignite one of the 4 citronella torches lining the edges of the Seagull's spacious deck. Victor caught sight of her. In reality, he noticed her figure in those snug jeans and the expanse of smooth skin revealed by her raised top as she reached. When she turned around, he stood there silently, a faint smile playing on his lips until he realized she was looking directly at him. Was all he managed to utter, his embarrassed mind unable to form coherent thoughts. The woman standing before him appeared to be no taller than 5 feet and weighing no more than 100 pounds. Victor observed, however, he couldn't help but notice that a significant portion of that weight seemed to be concentrated in her chest. As her arms rested at her sides, he could discern about 3 inches of well-defined core muscles beneath her prominent breasts. I get that a lot, she asserted confidently. Pardon? Vic's mind finally caught up with his ears as he glanced at the woman's face for the first time, realizing she was Asian American with large eyes and straight black hair falling to her shoulders. She noticed the recognition dawning on his face. I'm joking. I'm just joking, the woman interjected. You're not the first person to take a moment to realize I'm Asian. It usually takes a while for men to meet my gaze. No, that's not what I meant, Vic protested, perhaps a bit too loudly, drawing the attention of several nearby people. She gestured for him to lower his voice, causing him to blush deeply. I'm Dr. Vic Washington, he said, extending his hand. I've been AL's business partner for quite some time. Yeah, I recognized you from the news, the woman replied, noticing Vic's grimace. I'm Lainey Brand, mostly a friend of Marilyn's. I didn't mean to offend you with my comment about the news. I suppose it's akin to people avoiding eye contact with me when they talk, she added. Fair point, Vic responded. How about we grab a drink? Then I'll converse with you while maintaining eye contact, and you can pretend I'm not a pitiful sap whose wife publicly embarrassed him. The woman found herself momentarily speechless, realizing she might have been as obvious as Vic when he was ogling her ample cleavage. Sure, she said, giving him a shy smile. For the next hour, Victor engaged in conversation with the woman until he realized he was dominating her attention. He apologized for any social awkwardness and expressed his intention to let her interact with other guests. She reassured him that she enjoyed their conversation, and they parted ways to mingle with others. Although Victor discreetly kept an eye on her for the remainder of the evening, Alan noticed Victor's behavior and joked about the strain it would cause on his neck from constantly looking over his shoulder. He suggested swapping places so Victor could have a clearer view without straining. Victor acknowledged his attempt at being subtle and cool, albeit unsuccessfully. Alan then provided some background information about Lainey, mentioning that she was 3 years younger than Victor, a longtime friend of Marilyn's, and worked as a reference librarian. Her previous marriage of 20 years ended due to infidelity on her husband's part, leaving her single for several years. Victor expressed surprise at how someone like Lainey could remain single for so long, questioning if she had overly high standards. Alan explained that while Lainey was highly regarded by their friend Marilyn, she was also selective about potential partners and wasn't eager to rush into another marriage unless it was with the right person. Understanding Alan's explanation, Victor simply responded with a thoughtful acknowledgement. Lainey and Vic didn't reconnect for the rest of the night, and she slipped away without Vic getting her number. He wasn't concerned, though, as he knew Marilyn had it. Vic waited 2 days before calling Marilyn. He didn't need to explain his reason for calling. "You, sir, have remarkable self-control," Marilyn remarked, instead of starting with the usual niceties. "Or you're just plain stupid." Vic was somewhat surprised. Marilyn seldom cursed and hardly ever dropped the F-bomb. "I was trying to play it cool, not appear desperate," Victor explained. "Did you really start with an A?" Marilyn teased. "Then why stress over looking cool to her? You ruined that with a simple 2-letter word. Or maybe it was the drooling." Victor was relieved Marilyn couldn't see how much he was blushing. "So are you going to dial her number right away or spend 2 days pondering the right and wrong approach?" Marilyn quipped. "You're quite the master debater." "We all know that." Marilyn chuckled. "Always the jokester, Mar," Vic replied. "Can you give me her number now?" "Sure, but remember what I already told you about building a relationship rather than just expecting it to magically happen," Marilyn cautioned. The very next day, Victor extended an invitation to Lainey for dinner and a movie on the upcoming Friday. He chose a high-end Italian restaurant for dinner and allowed her to pick the movie. "Are you trying to impress me with this restaurant?" Lainey inquired. "Did Marilyn mention I have Italian heritage?" "No, honestly, I wasn't aware," Victor replied. "I simply didn't want to take an Asian woman to a Chinese, Japanese, or Korean restaurant." "Well, I'm mostly Chinese, but it's from my other ancestry that I inherited these," she remarked, adjusting her posture to emphasize her chest. "I know when you think of Chinese, you probably envision a gymnast, right? Double D isn't the typical stereotype." Victor blushed, uncertain why exactly. He supposed he wasn't accustomed to a woman with prominent assets speaking so openly about them. When he glanced back up, she was gazing directly at him with a smirk. "Apologies if I come off as too direct." "Didn't Marilyn give you a heads up?" she asked. "Not really. She usually ensures there are few single women at gatherings, but keeps me in the dark about them," Victor admitted. "Says I need to make an effort myself." Lainey burst into laughter. Victor soon learned that Lainey had no qualms about letting out a hearty laugh when amused. "That's my girl," Lainey cheered. Vic discovered that Lainey didn't shy away from shedding tears when the moment struck, as evidenced by her emotional reaction to the ending of the romantic movie she chose. It turned out that her father's passing, much like the father of the female lead in the film, was the reason behind her tears. Victor wasn't aware of this until Lainey shared the information during a late-night dessert and coffee outing. After waiting for 2 days, Victor called Lainey to arrange another date, which she eagerly accepted for the upcoming weekend. Their 5th date culminated in both of them ending up in Victor's bed. About a month later, Marilyn had lunch with Lainey, and it didn't take long for her to inquire about the progress of Lainey's relationship with Victor. Why would his ex-wife let him go? "He's attractive, well-built, a gentleman, and so much more," Lainey remarked, her cheeks flushing slightly. "He even maintains eye contact with me, well, most of the time, except when I wear that red silk dress. I'd be astonished if any man didn't spend the whole night ogling my cleavage in that dress." Both women chuckled, realizing that Dr. Victor Washington might as well have claimed to be a married man at that point. In reality, it would be another 6 months before their wedding took place. Dr. Victor Washington's wedding announcement received only a passing mention in the local newspaper, not the extensive coverage it garnered nationwide. The media couldn't resist delving into the scandalous details of the marriage of the jilted husband. "Damn them," George Burrell exclaimed to Arthur Clarke over the phone, hurling a newspaper across the room. "Every time one of them does something, there's another article about the jilted husband, and the press starts poking around again. That woman who cheated still works for you, right?" "Yeah," Clarke replied, uncertain of the direction of the conversation. "Get rid of her," Burrell whispered fiercely. "Send her somewhere the press will never find her." 2 weeks later, a disgruntled Tracy Washington found herself running the firm's small office in Paducah, Kentucky. Ongoing media attention had rendered her unemployable elsewhere for a decent salary. While she fared financially in the divorce, with no family or social life to speak of, her job was all she had left. Vic was taken by surprise to find a note from George Burrell placed prominently on his office desk when he arrived at work on a Monday morning. It was securely sealed, leaving Vic curious about its sender until he opened and perused its contents. Contained within was a rather unconventional invitation, if one could even classify a summons from Burrell as such. It proposed a meeting with the mafia boss in his office for lunch that very day at noon, with only the two of them present, as stated in the note. Although Vic had never encountered Burrell face-to-face, he was well aware, like many others, of the rumored association between Burrell and the demise of the man involved with his unfaithful partner. While pondering the reason behind the summons, Vic was certain he couldn't afford to disregard it. Following a thorough pat-down, Vic was guided into Burrell's office by a towering figure who seemed to be having a rough day. He was directed to a table on the side, already adorned with what seemed to be a lavish Italian lunch. Burrell introduced himself, shook Vic's hand, and escorted him to a seat. "It's just us here, and this office undergoes bug sweeps daily, so we can speak openly," Burrell remarked. "I owe you an apology of sorts. As you're probably aware, I'm the one who altered the course of your life. It was a monumental mistake, I can assure you. You were never meant to be affected. Heck, I didn't even know who you or your wife were." "Mr. Burrell, if I may interject," Victor said, surprising Burrell with a brilliant smile. "There's no need for apologies from you. In fact, you did me a great favor." Burrell stared at Victor as if he had sprouted a second head. Victor paused, took a sip of the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old bourbon Burrell had poured, and smiled once more. "Ah, that's truly amazing," Victor remarked as Burrell stared at him intently, anticipating an explanation. "Oh, yeah, sorry. So, like I was saying, I honestly had no idea my unfaithful wife was cheating on me. You not only brought that to my attention, but then you did something I had only fantasized about when you had her lover taken care of. And the way you had his masculinity revoked was a brilliant touch. I hope your associate gave him a moment before administering the final shot. Spending 4.5 months in jail was a small price to pay for his demise, so thank you sincerely for that. Well, if you're at peace with it, then I'll stop feeling guilty. Cheers." The two men nodded at each other, downed their shots, and emphatically placed their glasses back on the table.